Hey everybody who's watching this on YouTube, this is a part of an ongoing tutorial series that is live streamed. Theoretically, if I'm good at this, check down below for a timestamp to when the stream starts. I'm gonna go notify people that I'm actually live. Now let's see if we can do this properly. And by properly, I mean absolutely awful. Copy that. There we go. Yo, sketch. There we go. That worked. Yo. What do I want to put as my funny image while we're waiting? I think I'll just put this here. I'll do for now. Yeah, those are totally not conspicuous. Definitely not. Alright. Yeah, it's time! I think I've finally come to a, point where I think I can reasonably argue that I have enough stuff to talk about for this tutorial to be successful. I'm really just kind of snowball, snowball I guess is fine. Throwing things out there and trying them. So this one might be a little bit different than the last one because this is a little bit more freeform, and I'm hoping to make this a little bit more interactive also because the topic today is world building, and I'm gonna just drop this real quick here so we can get right into it. Blump. There we go. I'm gonna probably be using Clip Studio for the entirety of this stream, namely because I think it'll be more helpful if we can actually look at the design process in an actual art program and not have to rely on funny little draw lines, which Roll20 does. Yo, Professor Stream. That's me, I am Dr. Stream. Ugh, I've got a little bit of a throat thing going on, so I apologize if my voice is a little fucked today, but I'm gonna do my best, and yeah. So, yo, Jim Jared, oh my god. Actually, I should probably post a blue ski. I'm gonna post a blue ski before we start. I'm gonna actually do what I promised and actually promote myself. Tutorial on. So how you doing, Chad? You ready for some quick tips, some fun stuff today? That should be good enough. So, I want to go over a few things today, and that's basically just that. I'm going to turn the music down now that we're actually going to talk. Shout out to this album, by the way, it helps me actually focus on stream. I found out that this didn't get copyright struck, which is the main reason I'm using it again, because I still don't have the thing to split my audio setup. But my thought was that we could just get started off with some really basic things. So this is the open world tutorial. Let's make that not designed for Yu-Gi-Oh players. Actually read it a little. There we go. More map knowledge. Yes, yes. So, I had a thought that I thought would be really cool for this whole series. Our last episode being on map making and this one being on kind of an open world thing. I've got the map we made last time right here, and I thought it would be kind of cool if not only was I able to teach you guys my own process and answer questions and all that throughout the series, but if we were also working towards the end goal of having an actual playable mini campaign Maybe, I don't know what it would actually look like a 4-session mini-campaign or something. So what you guys help me make on stream is actually going to be something that, theoretically, at the end of all of these, I could just give out for free. And y'all could play whatever we make. Which, at this point, I've got no clue what we're making. But we've got a cool street, and we've got a cool street and dreams, damn it. The other thing that I would like to do, well, I'm saying it'll be whatever we make during stream. That doesn't mean it's going to be good. Look, chat, don't give yourself too much credit. I know I'm the hand guiding, but there's only so much we can do on stream, and I don't think I would... Streaming the entirety of a process of making a tabletop sounds like hell. I don't know. It's an idea, it's a thought, but just to have some direction for today, we're going to use this map as a basis for making the world. So there were a few things that I was asked to do, namely, we need to talk about timers, and we need to talk about open versus linear. So these are some very simple game concepts, but here, I'm going to grab a little thing. Very minor spoilers for Learned Mortality here if you haven't seen it, but ultimately speaking, this shouldn't give too many spoils. I'm gonna also make this black and white real quick so I can see it easier. Alright, that looks good. So this is the game map that I built for Learned Mortality. It's very simple, very straightforward. Jared, shut up. We're gonna go in with... Is that good? Is that visible? It's visible. Yeah, that'll do. Should give chat homework. That is actually a really fun idea. I would need chat to actually want to do that, though. I don't know, does chat really want to help that badly? I think it would be cool. Put a little lesson plan at the end of the episodes. Today's going to be a lot more chill because I have a lot less energy, so it's probably going to be more of a conversation today than me, like, talking at you like last time was. Because I've got a lot less tips for this, arguably. Actually, I have an idea. This might be a good example for us to talk about something else. Yeah. So, this is a concept as old as fucking time, but the concept of semi-linear map making here. This is, I think, one of the best visual examples of what you're kind of going to be doing. So here, let me lay out some stuff. So, we got the starting point right here. This is where your players start. Imagine this like the sky station in this Mario map. You can do pretty much whatever the hell you want, and then from this point, I essentially give the players a bunch of options on this map. So we have a little mini mission. Make this even more visible. Yeah, blood red. There's a small mission at the Marine Lab. There's a small mission at the Titanic, just simply when you see it. There is the opportunity to explore here, and there's the opportunity to explore here, and theoretically here. And really when you're making maps, I think... Oh, fuck. That's not what I was doing. I think it's easy if you break it up into, like, chunks, essentially. So, while LM is presented like an open world campaign, and open world simply means that at any point you have the right to choose as a player where you go. Now, even Learned Mortality I wouldn't say is a true open world game, it is an open environment game. What I mean by that is, this is as far as you can go. If I'm running Learned Mortality, I'm never going to be like, oh yeah, you can keep going that way. No, absolutely not. Because you wanna have like some limit to what you're going to focus on. Otherwise, you're going to end up being like certain wonderful people I know and building an entire universe and planets and alien races and physics systems. Like, you can go that far. Don't get me wrong. I just don't recommend it, especially if you're new to this whole thing. When I started Learn Mortality, it was actually a very simple goal I gave to myself, which was smallest possible space. One of the earliest designs of Learn Mortality looked like this. It was a space station. It had nodes that you could go to, which were like destroyed. Maybe you had to build your way across to access, like, let's say this is A node, this is B node. You can access B node at the start of the game, and let's say B node can lead to C node, or you could fix this path. So you've got, theoretically, 1, 2, and 3 different ways to go at the start. So this is how you're essentially going to structure your map, or at least should think about it. Rather than just being like, here's this large open area, think about points of interest in your story. For example, what do they learn at point A? Let's say point A teaches them alien distress call, right? They come in here, they get an undecipherable alien distress call coming in through their radios. Cool, that adds intrigue, that adds some questions, and it doesn't really answer anything. Let's say down here, we have a lexicon, which allows you to translate the distress call. So if you go either way, you don't solve the whole puzzle. You have to go both ways to solve the puzzle. So ultimately speaking, this area counts as like a node to continue on, and like, let's say your final goal is communicate with the aliens, right? You need the distress call to even know there is aliens, and you need the lexicon to be able to figure it out. So ultimately speaking, what this gives your players is a sense of freedom for being able to explore this starting area. And if they decide, oh, this is broken, but I'm going to try and go across it, and you let them and reward them with theoretically getting to what they might assume is a, like, either secret or locked off area like this, because, like, they'll see this right at the start and they'll be like, ooh, I obviously want to go there. And then maybe they see the door when they come through and they're like, oh shit, we skipped all of B. We're fucking god gamers. But in actuality, you yourself, you wanted them to go this way as one of the options. That's kind of like the psychology of it. It's a lot more of like, a thing that gets thrown around in the game design space is the illusion of choice, which is actually, I think, is a very helpful, if a little bit oversimplified method of looking at it. But you're essentially wanting to allow the players to see the information and not tell them where to go. There are other methods of making a game. You can see here, this is the Mario Galaxy map. I think this is a good example of you start, you get a level, you can either go back and do like the other levels, or you can keep going. This is like an optional thing that you could do literally at any time. You could go 100 plus hours into the game and then come back and do this. So this is like, this is less rigid open world, and this is more, how do I explain this? This might be what you would want to do if you are spending more time on just letting the players live in the world rather than trying to tell a specific story. Because having little bonus adventures like this, not only does it give them like a break if they need a break, right? But it also throws out the idea that there are things to discover. That there's something else out here that maybe isn't super important, but could lead to something important. And, like, obviously in this case it gets you starbits, who fucking cares? But, like, imagine if this was a legendary item or something like that in a D&D campaign. Sense of discovery, I think, often has a lot more to do with an open world feeling satisfactory rather than, actually being open. However, let's say you really, really are dedicated to the idea of an open world. Let me go grab a map of Earth real quick. How the fuck do you approach that? Well, I can give you a few tips, and you're going to be surprised that it's almost exactly the same thing. So here we've got the fucking Earth. I would hope you know what this is. If you don't know what this is, hello from the past. Hope you're doing well, artificial intelligence overlord. Please raise my social credit so I don't die. You've never seen this before? Are you from the future? Fuck, man. Okay. So this in and of itself, again, I do this for my own eyes, but I turn it to grayscale so I can see the contrast better. This is a lot. I don't need to tell you that this is a lot. And the appropriate approach to this might be... Oh god. Hold on. Fucking... Yeah, that's how you spell theater. Whatever. Theater of the mind is a method where you... This is very useful. I'm glad. I hope to answer it. Again, if you have any questions, throw them out into chat and I'll try and answer them while we're going. Gives me more topics to talk about. ADHD brain might get distracted though, fair warning. So Theater of Mind is a method of running tabletop games. It is not one I like. However, it is one that a lot of people use, and especially when you have less resources available to yourself. Say you're not an artist, or you can't afford Roll20's like premium, which it's kind of expensive, I'm not gonna lie. The only reason I don't mind supporting them is because they're pretty independent, and I think they deserve to exist. And also, it's my livelihood and all that. But let's just say you don't have access to that. You want to just play pen and paper, Dungeons and Dragons, rogue going on an adventure, and being a little murder hobo. Okay, that's completely fine. And one thing I would say is that Theater of the Mind campaigns generally lend themselves to being open world a lot better. Because at the end of the day, you don't have to put anything finished in front of them. So a theater campaign is generally done entirely through spoken word. Maybe occasionally pulling out maps for calculating battle distances, but primarily keeping it all to dialogue and conversation between the players. So that is one possible way that you can make an open world easier on you. The other way, and this is the way that I would approach it personally, where is she? Where did she go? Hello? What the fuck? Okay. Ghost. I killed her. I fucking killed her. I talked about Theater of the Mind. I wonder how many people are going to be bothered by theater being spelled like that. I hope it's a lot. It's actually something funny. Whenever I'm writing stuff like this, I never fix spelling mistakes because it's never worth the time to go back and fix them. So like half the times I'll get layers like line art is spelled Linert or Calork. As a dyslexic person, I cannot tell. Fuck yeah. But let's go back to what I was talking about, which is workload. This is like the most important thing to consider when making one of these. Say Ambrosia, a city map for an example of an urban environment. If you want to provide it, I can break it down. Yeah, definitely. I could use it as an example to break down kind of all these things. But let's take a look at the Earth real quick. So rather than thinking about it in terms of trying to figure out what the best method is to do this, I guess I'll use squares. Rather than thinking about it as like, oh gosh, I have to do Wisconsin, Minnesota, Canada, and go up here and maybe do Greenland and then fucking Iceland if I really want to. Rather than thinking about it like that, you can instead just simply, well, there's North America, there's South America, there's Africa, there's Europe, there's Asia, there's... That's not accurate, actually. I'm gonna be more like this. I'm doing this quick. Yeah, that works. There's Oz. And there's Learn Mortality. And sure, Greenland. Let's say you really want to go to Greenland. Already, that breaks it down into 8 different boxes, which is pretty helpful. And let's say you don't have much time, so maybe before the campaign you cue the players, and because this is really funny, let's start in Greenland. Okay, we start in Greenland. So what you would want to do is you would assume that, oh hey, maybe these two areas are the ones I should focus on, because they're the most likely places where they're going to go. And even further, maybe there are some places of interest. So let's say Vatican City has a map, because there's some weird vampires in the Vatican City as per usual, and they're holding artifacts, and you really want this to be detailed when the players find it. But otherwise, on this part of the journey, like right here, let's just say this part is theater, and let's do a little funny thing that says linear/defined. We'll do blue for that. So a combination of linear and theater makes that. So you really focus on the areas where you know the players are going to go, and then you kind of just, you know, do whatever for the rest. Maybe you have like a list of bullet points that's like, here. It's like Vatican City, vampires, Pope bad, ancient god artifacts. Yep, that's correct, totally. And then you just go off of this bullet point until they actually get to the area with the map. This way, you're focused on the lore points that you yourself know are going to be important to your campaign, and you can focus prep the areas that you know are going to show up. And then for if whatever reason the party gets really attached to something, let's say, for example, the party adds their own little twist, and they decide to go and stay at Italy for a while, because they really love Italy. You don't know why they like Italy, but they love Italy, so they go to Italy. This was not your plan, but that's okay, because you were able to write these notes about all of Europe, and you know, there are vampires in Europe, and there are some ancient god artifacts, so maybe they catch wind on the night trade over here in Italy that there are pallet boxes that are secretly containing ancient relics, and then you use that to build a map in between sessions. And this does two things. One, it supports what the players want, which is they want to go to Italy. Doesn't really matter if you wanted them to go to Italy. If you let them like choose all of these things and you are willingly making the world this open, you're gonna want to let them go anywhere they pick. So they go over to Italy. But if you build a map, it makes them also think, oh my god, my choice was important, it mattered? I'm so fucking smart. Again, you're kind of ego boosting your players, and this is a good thing. You want them to feel good about themselves. You want them to think that their choices matter. And it's not that they don't matter, it's merely that you aren't preparing for everything, you're just simply adapting. You want to be very flexible. You want to be able to make sure that your play area, these continents here, that's your play area. These blue ones, that's what you care about. And the green being what the players care about. And the red is what you should prep beforehand. I hope that gives like an idea of how to like segment and prioritize stuff in map building, because that's what I would normally do, is, you know, just get the bullet points down first, figure out your important areas, and then work on like refining those areas that you know will go. Don't try to prep for everything, yes, precisely. And that's pretty important so you don't go crazy when working on an open world. But I think that the method I personally prefer, and the one that I'm going to focus on here for talking about these other open world concepts, is the limited play area open world. So like Learned Mortality, where you're stuck in this part of Antarctica, but you can go anywhere there. That, to me, is the perfect blend of freedom and focus. You get to put your little places of interest down and refine them, but also exploration is like limited to an area, and the players can discover things. And this allows you to limit the number of like blue bullet points essentially to a manageable amount, so that rather than having to do bullet points for every area, you can actually make the maps and the encounters and all of that and really refine it. And for me at least, this may not be the case for you because everyone GMs differently, but for me it is very satisfying to have a small amount of incredibly refined encounters rather than a large amount of mediocre encounters. And especially when you're new to this, I think you should focus on a small area of play. You know, dip your toes in, maybe do a 4-session game with your players that takes place in a small town in rural Germany, maybe. You're out in Baden-Württemberg, and you're like up by the foothills, and you find a cave with trolls in the city. You know, something like that. That's a potential, like, how do I put this? I guess what I'm saying is you should not go in. Oh my god, Blue, hello! We're actually talking about 3 different types of scale right now. So I've got the full open world, we've got the limited open world, and then we've got the linear open world. But I'm focusing on limited open world at the moment because I think that's the easiest one for new people to world building. Yeah, so essentially don't go into it expecting to be able to do something like this world map. A lot of new tabletop GMs, especially Dungeons & Dragons players, I've seen it so much, really want to do something like this at the start, you know? However, this is generally not... Oh yeah, we've had TTS for ages, Jared. Where have you been? It's been there for like 2 years, dude. Yeah, a lot of this can be your end goal, and it's perfectly fine to like work on this alongside your other projects. Say this is your like your test campaign, right? I'm gonna get a darker color. Okay, so this might end up being your prep for the 1 to 4 session one. That doesn't look right. Okay, and then let's say that's how long you play it. So you might end up prepping for, let's say, 4 months, and you might end up playing for 3 weeks. This is generally what a tabletop prep cycle is gonna look like. Unfortunately, the amount of time it'll take to make is way longer than the amount of time you'll probably be playing it. That's just kind of a fact of the matter. But let's say alongside that, you've got your big open world, and you actually started that first, and then you listen to my stream and you're like, okay, I'll do something small. So maybe you decide to take a break from that, but you're still sort of working on it, so you do a little bit of work here, right? But you mainly focus on your other game, kind of trying to learn both of them at the same time. And then maybe during the play, you actually use this as an opportunity to see what ideas work and what ideas don't work. Because again, a lot of this with world building is going to come into your specific group of players. What I am teaching you works for me and the people I like to run for. However, not everybody is going to like this method. Not everybody is going to like learned mortality. In fact, I know that a lot of people do like learned mortality, but have very specific opinions on how they want to run it. And from what I've seen in the break time server, all of those methods are valid. The only important thing at the end of the day is that your players are having fun and you're having fun. So if you're not having fun, change it. That's my advice. Don't feel bad about changing it. You hate your lore? Change it. Your players haven't seen it yet. Hate your map? Fix it. Make it better. I want to show you guys something. And then I'm going to pull up Vaughn's thing and look at it because I'm very curious. Yeah, I might be good at stuff now. I would argue this map looks like shit compared to what I've made recently, the Learn Mortality map, but I know a lot of you think that Learn Mortality is really cool, and I'm glad for that. But you do not need to be like this level of detailed. Let me show you the Star Road Now map. This was a pseudo theater map. This is the fucking map from the Star Road Now. It looks really shitty now. But when I first drew this was an undertaking, man. This took me a whole day. So yeah, artistic improvement, all of that, running improvement as we go. But you can see I was using the exact same methodology I was just teaching you guys about breaking it down into chunks. I have East Electros, Pinion, West Electros, Morpheus, Wharf, and then the empty government districts. And those are all broken up into little chunks. And then within those manageable chunks, I figured out what areas we wanted to go to. There's a Dream Core map, there's a Wharf shopping district map, there's a police station map. You could technically go anywhere in any of these, like, little districts, but it didn't really matter that I didn't have the maps for them, because at the end of the day, we're just sort of trying to support the idea that you can go anywhere without really suggesting anything that's off the beaten path. Did the party end up doing something that I didn't expect them to do in Starboard Now? What do you think? Starboard Now was pretty fucking linear compared to most games I run these days. So I'm gonna say no, I don't think they did. If I ran Starboard Now today, I made a lot of mistakes when running Starboard Now. The linearity, I think, is one of the big things, because in my head it was episodic. And, like, yeah, at the time when we were running, that was perfectly fine because none of us were taking this very seriously. Funny Summer Game is a running inside joke. And then it exploded into a lot more. But essentially what happened is I told everyone that I was going to run an episodic game with Monster of the Week styles, and it was going to be about 12 episodes, and we're going to play it like a TV show. You're just going to kind of end up where you need to be. And that's how Starboard Road ran. And that is the last type of game that you can run, which is linear, 100% linear. It does not matter what you do over the course of the game, you will end up at the same bullet points along the way. The difference is simply what state you will be in when you get to that point. And I think that there's something to be said for that method of running. I think it still has a lot of merit. I also think that it's not good for games that you're going to be showing to other people. However, for games that you're playing with your friends, this is a perfectly valid method of doing it, especially if you tell them directly. If you don't tell them directly and try and pull them along linearly anyway, that is something we call railroading, which is essentially forcing the players in a direction despite it being out of character. However, if they know going in that it's essentially going to be a single track, then it's not railroading because everyone at the table has agreed that they want to play a linear experience. So something to remember there. Linear games aren't necessarily railroading, but railroading can happen a lot easier in linear games. What I mentioned earlier about a player wanting to walk off the side of Antarctica over here, that is also technically a form of railroading. However, at the start of the game, I told all of the players, yeah, you're gonna stay in this map area. There's a big storm, you're not leaving. And everyone figured out pretty quickly, like game design, what I meant by that, which is, yeah, you're gonna play in the playfield. Go fucking figure. Oh, this is neat. Yeah, I think this illustrates a lot of what I was talking about. Vaughn has sent me a map. I'm gonna just try and break down real quick how this works in the context of everything, just by making some assumptions and talking about how I would handle it. So, this looks like a modern setting with a lot of roads. What I would say in this case is, I see that you've got this broken down into districts here, which makes it a lot easier to prep. I'm gonna turn down the, oops. I'm gonna turn down the hue just a little bit, but I still want to see your break up, so we'll keep it there. And do like that. All right. We'll do red, sure. Yeah, so from what I can see, right, this is the area that has been given the most focus. I imagine this is either where the players are going to end up or what they're going to spend the most time on. And you've got all the surrounding areas that they could theoretically go to. One of the things that you can do with a map like this is, like, for example, even actually looking at the map and the roads, this might be the case. There might be a town here, right? But you don't label the name. So it's like, it's world lore, but your players don't see a name, so they won't gravitate towards it. That's a little bit of another psychological thing you can do. Another way to make players interested in something is this. Right here. This is a perfect example. This and this. So these are things that they can see from their starting area. We're gonna assume it's Harding here. And they have funny little names. Bear Island, Rattlesnake Island, you immediately know what those are. Just by hearing those names, you're like, ooh, those are gonna be fun. Wait, is this a real area? I thought this was a fantasy map. Well, whatever, I'm gonna assume it's a fantasy map. Is it a real place in New Hampshire? Oh, it shows what I know. Alright. Well, let's say that God was planning the map and put Bear Island and Rattlesnake Island here. These are essentially like little flags that are calling out to your players and are like, go here, pick me, this is weird. Because not only are the names smaller, so you will catch the eyes of someone who's like zooming in and paying attention, but they're weird. You could even go further. Let's say this is Snake Bite Point. Or something like that. You can change the name. Anything like that works essentially, right? Or even Echo Point. Like you can do a lot with these names, and so what this essentially would mean, at least to me, Bear Island is real and it has bears. I am very proud of Bear Island. So it means to me that you've got some optional paths, right? And let's mark out Harding, right? So this is like your big starting area, and then before I go on to this other stuff over here, I got a little distracted. Let's say that you really want to prep specifically this map here because you have a beach encounter at Lake Wentworth. You really want to prep downtown because you want your players to be shopping, so you do Tube House. And one of the players lives over in Haven. Okay, cool. And then the rest of the in-between, you're like, okay, this is in New Hampshire. So that gives you a lot to work off of. You can make bullet points, you can New Hampshire lore. You can figure out what type of people live there. You can find the history. Which leaves this entire red area as a theater area. Because you're not going to make a map for every single house on every single block and every single street in Harding. That's just stupid. You never need to do that. Even in a 100% open world map. Do not do that. The only way I think that's possible is if we're in some way, shape, or form in the future, it's the year 3000, and artificial intelligence is no longer morally bankrupt, and you have a electrical workhorse that's able to turn out good maps behind you. That is the only world in which I would say you could do this. Otherwise, just don't, man. It is not worth it. And the main thing you should also know is that the more thin you spread yourself, the lower quality everything else is going to be. Just by adding Haven, you have made Tube House and Wentworth worse. Probably not bad enough for it to be noticed, but let's say you went really crazy and you added every single district, right? Okay, now Lake Wentworth, which is where the game starts, is awful. But it's the same level as these other areas, so really what I'm saying is focus on what matters. You're the GM, you know what matters. But yeah, okay, we got Harding. Nice, that's only 3 areas to work on, and we can see our new goals here. And we're gonna prep both of these because important story areas happen at these. And I'm gonna show you the optional path. So theoretically, the players could go here and take a boat. They could go here over to Cluny, maybe see a Cluny experience, and then go over this way. They could come this way, take some bridges, and go down to Bear Island first. They could maybe go in between them. They could decide to take that ferry over to Bear Island. And as you can see here, just by having these little nodes, your world becomes open, even if at some point, like, they need to go to both of these islands, let's say, to get, let's put an end point. An Endcott! How fitting. Yeah, Endcott is where it ends. So you need the Bear Medallion and the Snake Medallion in order to get into the Quetzalcoatl's Temple in New Hampshire. Yeah, everyone knows the fucking Aztecs love New Hampshire, dude. You come this way. Or this way, and that's because those are your two ending points, so then you prep the in-between here, you prep the in-between here, because you know they're going to be coming from one of those two spots. And that gives you, let's do a little count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 areas. And how many routes do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So at the end of the day, you've set up this map in a way that there are actually more routes than there are locations, which means you've added more complexity to your map than the amount of work you've put into actually making maps. Isn't that neat? And of course, this goes crazier the more that your story branches. It is not uncommon for there to be a thing like a branching path like this. And then, say you go to that one, and then you go to this one, and maybe there's 4 options. And you know, your trees get even more and more complicated as they go, and then you gotta consider that each of these is another option from each of these, you know? And then at the end of the day, that's an insane amount of paths, right? And all I did was add 3 more nodes. This is just basic math and shit. This is called a tree graph, if you're interested. There's some ways that you can do this, like say this is a permutation or a combination. You can actually easily calculate how many options they have. In this case, it's a combination because order does matter, and you can go back to all of these other things, but yeah. That's the math of it, and that doesn't really fucking matter. I just think it's cool. I bombed your dear baby campaign with lesbian vampire Quetzalcoatlus? Yeah, you opened this up. Did you think I was going to do something serious? I need to explain these concepts before we make our own map. But I think I've explained enough how to make a semi-linear map. Small question, should a certain area be able to be explored, but if the players haven't gotten a certain key, then it can't be fully explored, or should it be fully restricted? That is a wonderful question. I think we can probably use Learned Mortality as an example here. Let's look over here at Macaroni Island. There are 2 ways that you could go about making Macaroni Island. So Macaroni Island is an optional area in Learned Mortality. I'm not going to say specifically what it is, but it has an optional bit of information at it. And there are 2 ways you can go about this. You can go to the Marine Lab and then go to Macaroni Island, or you could bypass it and go directly there. So what you're saying is that, let's say they haven't gotten a full key, so maybe you want to put a key here where they can only go, and then we cross this one off, right? How do we do that? Let's say there's this big rift in the lake is here until they do something here. Very bandaged solution. You can come up with an actual better one yourself. That makes it so that you're basically choosing between, do you want to force a route where they have a key, or do you want both to be options, but maybe this one's harder? And in that case, that's what you've got to ask yourself. Keys are very good for making the map flow the way that you want it to. For example, let's say there's something here, and the lore makes no sense if they don't go to the Marine Lab. But you don't have, like, a way to tell them not to just go around it, right? There are so many ways they can go around it. That's when you want to try and encourage them to go to your key location first before going to the lock. Because in that case, you're able to segment the lore and pace it out properly. There is also something to be said for allowing them to be confused. And I am in the camp of, I think you should let your players get things out of order and be really fucking confused. Because I think that makes things a lot more fun. But if you're trying to run a very, like, concrete mystery campaign and you want them to be able to figure it out in the right order, then yeah, I think making your path lock-based is a good idea. There are probably some more complicated ways I could draw this out. I feel like I didn't do the best job at explaining. Does that make sense, Sketchy? Or would you like some more examples? I could say there's like... Makes it clear? Okay. One other thing I thought I would show is this idea of, like Luna put, the carrot on the stick. Right? So you can imagine this as like, from this starting area, right? They can see this, the goal, right? But they can't get there because there's like pit. Let's say there is a room here and a room here. We've got room A and you've got room B. They can go to room B and they can realize, we need a key. And then they have to go to room A to find the key. Alternatively, they can go to room A first, find the key, get to room B, and immediately bypass it. However, the reason that you would do something like this is if you have a room C, which requires knowledge that is only found in room A. So this is how you could structure your thing in a way where they don't realize why they're going a different route. They think it's for the key, right? Let's say it's literally a key. That's a pretty obvious motivation. But they discover knowledge, which changes how they would look at C at the end. And if it's really crucial to you, like, that they get that knowledge beforehand, you would probably want to structure it something like this so that they, you know, figure it out naturally, just by trial and error. Not giving specific details is like 4 out of 5 areas are open, while the 5th area is open. It's closed without the keys of the other 4 areas. Yeah, that's another way you could do it. Where you have like this goal and it has, like you said, 4 different locks on it, right? So you need these other 4 locks from, I don't know, let's just put more goals. Something like that, right? And you get your keys by exploring. And then, like, maybe this midway key allows you to get this far and find out you need 4 keys. And then you're like, I'm gonna go back and explore. Again, another way to look at it. I think if you break it down into nodes, you can do this to anything. These could be streets, these could be rooms in a house. This could be like a Luigi's Mansion type blowout. I'm good at speed drawing diagrams. Yeah, I directed a lot of 48-hour game jams. You get good at drawing quickly. I have a question for the different types of keys. Information-based, item-based, ability-based. What types are good for which kinds of genres and or environments? Excellent question. That is another wonderful consideration. You want your keys to be reasonable. Let's go back to this map. I think it's pretty easy to say, if I put a giant door on the highway here that required a key, that's fucking stupid. And I think the players would question the logistics of that. So instead, maybe there is a environmental trap. This area is on fire from a car crash, and you can't actually cross pi here until some time has passed. This is how you can put like an artificial little like block. And maybe this is semi-permeable, right? Maybe they can choose to go through the fire anyway, but this would be like really like at their own risk, you know? You can go through the fire, but are you sure you want to do that? Another way to give them the option to take it on in their own way. I mean, I am down with hearing spoilers for your campaign, however, if your campaign's players are in the chat, rip. But I think that's kind of how you would want to do it. You want your locks and keys. They can take so many different forms, other than just like an actual lock and key. Sometimes the locks and keys can actually be information. where there is a puzzle that you literally cannot solve until you have the pieces of it. To make this a more direct mechanic, in a lot of my JoJo's games, I run with a system called locked bazaar fields, which are parts of the global mystery that need to be revealed before you can figure out another mystery. For example, let's say you have a villain who has a time ability, but that time ability manifests as that villain running really, really fast. Before you're able to monologue and drop that villain's field, you need some sort of hint that they have a time ability, but you as a GM have no way to give that out directly through combat encounters, so you don't want them to basically drop the field and get all of the answers immediately just by fighting the villain. So you put a lock on them. They can still choose to fight them, but they cannot get that last little bit of information no matter what they do. So maybe they run away, or the villain runs away, or they choose not to fight him in the first place, and they find information in, say, a local track and field area that shows this villain actually, despite having ran the track course normally, seems to have altered the times of the other runners. Despite what it shows on the camera, the other runners appear to have been taking more time to complete the race than is actually shown on tape. Nobody watching noticed this because why would that happen? However, this allows you to learn, the villain has a time ability, and that drops that last lock. That's a way to do a lock around a mystery that is not physical, but knowledge-based. But that's kind of how I would start just by planning out a map. You kind of want to make sure that you get, here, I'm just going to duplicate this over here. Let me use text. We'll call this New World, yeah. So first you want to choose what your environment even is. This can be your setting, this can be your, genre. And I'm going to leave a space because we're going to actually use this to create our own world. Next, you could do something like areas of interest. And another part of this is plot points, so end tag, if there is one. Methods of travel. For example, how easy is it to get to different locations? Do you want travel itself to be an obstacle, or do you want to allow free travel anywhere? Oftentimes, you don't want to actually focus too much on the travel itself, unless that is the goal of your campaign, being something like a cross-country vacation flick. The cheesy world traveling flicks. Let me read this real quick. What about the opposite situation where a player, through random chance, guesses out information out of sync that is behind a locked mystery, so to speak? Interesting question. I think a guess is dependent on what that information is. If the player character figures it out in universe, you could do something of saying, congratulations, you've figured something out, I'm going to drop a lock on this ability, and then just kind of move on from there. And that works. It's a little bit clunky, but it works. Another way you could do it is you could have that player character or player immediately notice the key when they get into the area in question. Say we go back to that time ability, right? And the person's like, I feel like they have a time ability. When you get into the track and field area, rather than having to roll to spot the time, you can immediately just point it out to them, let them have a free win on it. I think it's very important that you would give that player an advantage of some sort, but I think how that advantage manifests is incredibly context sensitive, so I don't think there's a true right or wrong answer there. And then Luna, let's see here. I think an example for a campaign, let's say there's a roaming monster in a rural town, and the players are trying to hunt it down, and they slowly figure out the ability with each little encounter. Yeah, that is a fantastic idea. Like, if you imagine, like, a Mr. X type antagonist, I believe he is a well-known roaming monster. I've never actually played the game. The only Mr. X I know is my own Mr. X, but hey, whatever. What's a good example? Shit. Trying to think of a game with a roaming monster that you figure out if you're at it, and I don't actually know. But yeah, no, that can be done in video games. Yeah, in that case, your information, maybe you have a reveal at the end of each encounter, or you're playing the enemy secretly in the background, and the enemy themselves is like rolling to try and figure out what the players are doing, and it's a back and forth. There are a lot of ways you can handle that, and I think setting up the world so that at that point you want to design your world so it protects the villain, if that makes sense. Because your game doesn't really work if they immediately figure out the villain. So you want to make it in such a way that they can find the information, but they don't do what Blue did, unless they're like geniuses, you know what I mean? Ultimately speaking, let's say there's 7 locks, maybe they figure 1 out ahead of time. But it shouldn't be the case where they're figuring everything out ahead of time, because at that point, well, again, it's so context sensitive, it could work, right? But assuming that you're trying to make the mystery challenging, you would probably want to make that like the focus of your nodes and the build, where it's like, okay, this information is attainable here and here, but they can't just learn it, you know? And that also comes into another thing of when there is information like that that your players need to know to progress, and you're in an open world, it's very crucial that you make it so that information can be gathered in multiple locations, because let's say it's literally a note sitting on a desk, and you're like, there's no way they missed this, and then they blow up the building. They blow up the fucking building. I have had this literally happen in Learned Mortality. This exact thing has happened. And I'm just like, well, shit. In that game, it was fine, because I wanted them to struggle. But maybe you don't want them to struggle. Maybe that information's really important to how you want the game to progress, and now you're SOL and you have to scramble in the background to find a way for them to get it. This can all be avoided if you have multiple ways for them to find the information. Food for thought. Something to consider. Let's go back to this checklist. Oops. Okay, so we have determined an environment and a setting. We have determined what areas we want to focus on. We have determined the plot points, and then we have to determine the paths / obstacles. And ultimately speaking, I will go also to locks, and then one final topic, timers, which is another thing I was asked to talk about for this stream specifically, is the concept of an in-world timer, something that is ticking down and encourages them to prioritize one path or another. Timers are very fickle things. And I think when people are making them, sometimes they forget that if you make a timer too strict, what you're doing is you're doing that method of railroading. Even if you're giving the players the option to go after the timer or not, like, let me give an example. You can progress the plot by going to the donut shop, or you can go save this lady who is hanging over the top of a skyscraper and will die in 1 round if you go to the donut shop. Okay, maybe the donut shop is where you're supposed to go, but who's going to go to the donut shop? At that point, you are practically forcing them into a route. Even if you phrase it in such a way that it's a timer, then you are... it shouldn't be a timer, it should be something else, you know? At that point, it's actually better for you to not even give them the donut shop option, because then they won't feel like they're being forced away. I would go for the donuts. Yeah, you say that, but you probably wouldn't. A timer should not start ticking down until the players are aware of it. Yes, that is actually one of my bullet points on my notes over here. Another thing that I think is really crucial to know about the timers is if the players don't know about the timer, it doesn't exist. For all intents and purposes, there is no point in having a timer unless they know about it, or if you're doing some cheeky little things behind the scenes and you need some help with that. They're good for organization, but if the players don't know about the timer, don't punish them for it running out. Unless that is, like, again, I have to put this asterisk on everything I say because there is always an example where it does technically work. In Learned Mortality, there is a giant timer that is pivotal to the third arc of the game, and without that timer, the game doesn't work, and it is a timer that can only be hinted at towards the players and is not one that will be explicitly stated. And unfortunately, due to the survival horror nature, it is a very punishing timer if it goes off. They didn't know this at the start, and yeah, it does sound very brutal. That is a thing of you got to decide when you're figuring out your genre and your setting, is a timer like that okay? Like, even if it's punishing, it should still be fun. You shouldn't have a timer that's just like, the villain wins, you all die. Like, fucking what? I've seen that before, that's a thing. Like, the villain finishes their MacGuffin quest and just kills the world. Cool, dude. Great. Wonderful. That was fun. That was supposed to be my German voice, but sure, Ansler works. Yeah, you're very right. When making temporary pause or fully stopping a timer. How would I go about that? I'm not really sure how I can detail that any further than, like, the obvious. If a timer stops for some reason, it should be something that has visually explained it. And if you're fully stopping a timer, let's say maybe the players found something special that bypasses it completely. Or something small that can give extra time. Yeah, sure. No, those are all ways to handle it. Yep, you could definitely do that. That, again, goes back to the first part, though, where we're asking what the genre is. Maybe it's a doomsday clock thing. Maybe you're trying to get all of these little energy cells to keep this nuclear reactor going, and you have to venture out and get those energy cells, otherwise the nuclear reactor is going to blow up and they lose the game. That is an example where you could make a super punishing timer that ends in fuck you, you all die, but if they know about that at the start, it adds to the game rather than detracting from it. Really easy way to just think about this, though, is just think, if I was playing this game, would it be fun? Would I like this? You really shouldn't be doing things that you think your players are going to hate. I know that's obvious, but, like, some people. So I have to throw it out there. The timer is stopping the monster from getting stronger, but doing critical injuries delays the timer. Yeah, another good way to do it. But I think that's basically it. The things that you gotta remember is awareness and drastic / I don't know, weak. I'm not good at words right now. We just talked about those. Let's see here. Let me look at my list real quick. Which areas need to be made, breaking down the LM map, theming the game map, skipping the boring parts. I haven't talked about this yet. Okay. This is actually, I think, really important. Ultimately, your goal is to make the workload really easy for you, right? We talked about that back over here, where these blue spots are what you focus on, right? Well, that goes out to what your players are experiencing too. So, by not prepping the in-between here, you are skipping the boring month-long boat travel where nothing happens. Should you spend that time allowing them to roleplay for 30 sessions? Probably not. Because nothing's going to happen. And most players are smart enough to be like, okay, a month has passed in universe. My character is now slightly closer to this character because of the camaraderie of having traveled. Again, that is up to the players to figure out, and yes, by doing that month-long journey, you are going to get a more realistic relationship between the players. But if the players playing the characters are bored out of their mind, there is no point in doing this. You are just wasting their time. So, cut out the boring stuff. Think about, like, for example, I never, like, made maps for every single plot point along the flats here. I just was like, okay, you travel from point A to point B, here's a new map of interest. It would be really silly for me to force the players to drag themselves across a bunch of maps with nothing going on, you know? And also, it's easier for me to prep by not having to make those maps. It's a win-win. And then the last thing I have on here is optional encounters and discoveries, which I sort of talked about earlier, where this flip-swap galaxy over here is optional and you can do it whenever, and it gives you a reward. So yeah, I think I'm going to consider that talked about. So now that I've kind of talked about everything I think you should keep in mind when making a map, let's make a map. Oh my god. Paul Cock? What the fuck? Oh, Phil Cook. I don't know what this is. I'm not gonna trust that it's not gonna... Map music. No. No, I don't know if that's copyright or not. Who's Cock? Paul! Paul Cock! So, in this case, I'm gonna actually take this over here, and let's just put that map right there. Cover up her face real quick. Sorry, lady. You are now a map. So, in this hypothetical game world that we're creating together, now that you guys kind of have an idea of what we're looking for, let's start with an environment, a genre, a setting. Is there any environment that comes to you guys as something that we want to try and make? Is there anything that, like, piques your interest? This could be something like an urban setting, it could be a survival setting with like a zombie apocalypse. We could go super future, we could go mechs. There is a lot of things we could do here, but let's get some ideas in chat. What do you guys think? Zombie apocalypse? I think that's a really good one. Underground subway station map. That's really good for transport, yeah? Ancient rural town in Japan with forests and hills surrounding. Okay, okay. Yeah, I could probably combine all three of those. Minish capsized map, what the fuck do you mean by that? Like there's a big map and a small map? Do I put the bird hat in the game, Von? Do you want me to put a bird hat? You know, I do know Minish. Map that fits in your hand. Yes, you're saying two maps. Maybe. I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna do zombies. Because zombies are fun. And let's do it in the JoJo universe for now. Just have something... Why isn't this working? Hello? There we go. Just have something familiar, right? Those maps fit in your hand, they're meant to be held. Yeah. So our genre is going to be survival. And we're going to be in Japan. And some areas of interest are forest, rural areas, and the underground, which actually solves the second part here pretty nicely. Which means then that in the zombie survival scenario, which is making Kimura, this is actually reminding me of zombies on the New York metros a little bit too, which is fine. It's a very easy concept to understand. So in this case, then we have our 3 areas. So let's say there's a forest, a rural area, and an underground map. That's what we're going to work on, regardless of what the map looks like, right? And we're going to actually consider the rural area partially in progress because we've got this over here, which is going to be part of the rural area. Okay, so let's talk about the game itself then. We've got a zombie survival, that's pretty nice. What should be the player's goals? Is it just survive and learn what's going on, or is there something more? We can go into this more detail when I talk about writing main antagonists, but I wouldn't mind getting a bullet point down before continuing. Find a cure for themselves. They want to be zombies. Trying to infect them. Okay, that's the most generic way you could go. I like Jared's. I'm gonna take Jared's. They have to. They start out bit, and they have to keep themselves non-zombified. I think that's really interesting. Okay, so your goal is going to be bit survive, which can lead to us finding a main antagonist. So we don't know if we're doing a main antagonist. Maybe we are, maybe we're not. That's not for this stream though. We'll talk about that later. And how are we getting around? Are they going to be just walking everywhere, or are they going to be vehicles they can find? What do you think? Are we going to rely on the vehicles as unlocks? So something they can get if they're smart enough to build and or fix them up? Or maybe it's going to be in the case where there is still transportation, and maybe they're the only ones that have this virus. That could be an interesting way to do it, where they're blending into everything. Street flooded with cars that didn't make it. That is a way to do it. Whatever is available. We're going full apocalypse. Unlockable transport points. Yeah, I think I agree with that. So let's say there is... It's going to be 90% walking. Right? So this means that it's going to actually be very important that we consider distance and food and all of that. So I'll get into that once we get into the actual map. And then we've got subway. Let's say the subway is working. So there are subway points. You know, point A to point B. And this is your fast travel system. So this goes into that thing I talked about earlier of cutting out the boring shit. You want to go back to the start of the game, but you really don't want to walk through the zombie map? Hey look, subway station, right? Not only is this cool for the players to find, it helps your game flow better, so I agree with this. Zombies hate public transport. True. And then in the interim, we've got a 10% thing. It's an apocalypse, so obviously motor vehicles are going to kind of suck unless you're in a really open area, but they could fix up vehicles. Like, this is an option. Are they going to use all their resources on it? Who knows? But I think this is something that every player is going to consider, so you should have an answer for this. Even if it is just simply, nah, it doesn't work, you know? You know, just predicting what your players are going to want to do, that's a pretty obvious one. Another thing that they might want to do is leave the city, which would kind of ruin the entire point if we're doing a limited area like this. Oops, not like that. Hello? Click on the thing. There we go. So we've got a city, right? Why can't they leave? We could do it where there are giant mountains in the way and they can't traverse over them. The cure is local, maybe. We could do that the one exit is blocked by the government, sure. That is a normal thing that people would do. wall of flesh of combined zombies that ties into the plot? Fuck yeah, dude. The other side is the zombie wall. This is the chaotic evil flesh wall. Okay. And in here, this is your playable area. Okay, cool. That, as stupid as it looks, I think is enough to go off of. So, we've already sort of talked about this. We've got zombies. We've got medicine, because they're bit. We've got food. That's a big obstacle. And exhaustion from walking. Are there any other obstacles we want to throw in here? These are some pretty good ones, but I think there should be one more active threat to make this really good. Does someone give me an active threat? Special super zombies? Chaser zombie? It kind of goes into the main antagonist idea. Seems like a lot of people want a big zombie. Okay, we'll have a big zombie. That's like a reoccurring antagonist. Maybe it only shows up at night. Sure. Night zombie. Okay, big zombie. That's a thing. That's like big plot point, right? This is gonna matter. Let's talk about locks real quick. So we've got this little thing on the map real quick. They're trying to survive. They're trying to cure themselves. What might get in the way of that? Is there any information that we think they should find along the way? Does the big zombie have some locks on them, maybe? Is there something unique about the big zombie that makes it that we don't want to let them know that immediately? Eating smaller zombies to replace this decaying frame? Fun idea. Not related to what I'm asking, but fun. I'll put cannibal down. Patient Zero Big Boy. Ooh, yeah, he could be the first zombie. That is something they wouldn't have any reason to know. So we'll do that as a lock. Zombie is a cocoon for something more dangerous. Family NPCs of the players. Big zombie has locked up. I'm not sure how that would be a lock, Thon, but that is a good idea. I mean, a zombie what? What's a zombie prepare, man? I'm sorry, you just stroked me on that. Its heart could be used as the cure, maybe. Looks like it has a meal hookups that contain ingredients the player needs. Okay. It's more of a resource than a lock, but we could say that the reward... big zombie. So in order to get your medicine, you gotta fight the big zombie. That actually is really cool, because then you don't have to limit your medicine to simply buildings. You can have the medicine be something that they have to take a risk in order to get. And along the way, they learn more stuff. This is actually a wonderful loop of interest into information. And I think, I didn't really talk about this earlier because this is a very esoteric concept, but I think this is something really crucial in most of these games, is you should have some obvious point of interest that is an optional challenge, you know? Especially in a survival scenario, you're going to be gaining resources and taking risks. So there should be a reward for those risks. The zombie is very sentient. Okay, that is something that most likely would come up in encountering it. So maybe that isn't a lock necessarily, but that's a first encounter thing, so... The zombie is smart. Sure. Okay, I think that's a good amount of stuff. And I don't think we need to talk about timers because we already have one. Bit. No zombie. We don't want to become a zombie. That's got a timer. So how do you make this clear to the players? That's the thing we gotta think about, right? Because yeah, obviously they know that they're going to turn, but if you don't give them any idea of like how long it's going to take for them to turn, there's no sense of urgency as they get closer and closer to turning. So what we could do is we could have a thing like a stage system. So maybe they start at stage 1, which is just like brain fog, and then that goes to 2, and then that goes to 3, which is like full. So I start with like the first stage is mental, the second stage is skin changing, and then the final is like a full sort of thing. A 10-point system? We could definitely do that. That is definitely a way to achieve this. Yeah, that way each player has to manage their own. Zombies ever get more active at night? Yeah, this big guy. He only comes out at night. So let's go 10 points. So 1 to 3, 4 to 7, 8 to 10, something like that. So this is when they're like panicking, this is when they're fine, and this is when they're dead. Something like that. I don't think we're going to go into super detail on that yet, because I want to do a stream on writing custom mechanics at some point. So, is there a reason why Night 2 got dropped? What were the complications with it? What do you mean Night 2? Huh? Excuse me, undead. What? What did I say? What did I say? LM Night 2 mechanic. Still don't know what the hell you're talking about. There was no unique mechanic in LM Night 2. Day and night cycle. Yeah, that's literally... when we didn't sleep and went to Murphy? Oh. Because that wasn't a mechanic. The players made that up. And I didn't want them to keep doing it, so I asked them not to. That's why it didn't show up. Because they immediately decided to go out of the scope of the game, and I was too nice and let them do it. That's essentially why that happened. Insomnia is banned. What's with the face, mate? Account created 27 minutes ago. Alright. Cool. So, despite what this person in chat thinks, that is a perfectly valid method of doing it. Ultimately speaking, a conversation back and forth between the two player characters is very important. You want your players to be having fun, and you yourself want to be having fun, so obviously talking to one another. Didn't Tiller have a trait for not sleeping? Yes, and that was intended to be taken for just a simple night cycle, not having 2 nights. Ban Tiller? True. So in that circumstance, right, what you're doing is you're talking to your players and telling them what you expect and what they expect and all of that. I, at the time, made the decision to improvise a solution that works for everyone, right? But maybe that's not what you want to do. Maybe you want to have that down ahead of time. Also perfectly fine. It's important to know that you're never going to be able to predict everything your players do, and that you should not try to, because that is how you get into... That's how you get into this. Remember this? Don't do this. People who watch sequence break stuff, such as this person in chat, might not be aware of how much is actually improvised in the campaigns and think that we actually put a higher level of rigidity into them than is actually there. Tabletops by nature are a very flexible, open, and improvisational medium. You can make them rigid, but I think that it's a sign of a, I wouldn't say quality, but an experienced and or skilled GM to be able to decide when they have to put their foot down on a decision that is improvised and when they have to you know, just concede that, yeah, what the players wanted to do is reasonable, and even though it breaks their plan, they should just let them do it anyway. In the case of the Night 2 of Learn Mortality, it is a case where, while I was caught up in GMing, I made the mistake of just saying yes, and after the week in between the two, in the week between the two, how do I describe this? Twitch seems to be very, very, very insistent that you're a ban evader, Whooper. So, that's, I'm not getting good vibes from you, mate. So, why don't you back the fuck off? Sound good? Cool. In this case, though, I will go back to what I was talking about, which I think, despite the bad vibes, I'm going to talk about. There's actually something very important we can talk about here. Thank you, Jared. Which is that I would argue that me allowing them to continue into a Night 2 was a mistake. However, it's very debatable. That's mostly just because I myself like sticking to the plan. However, I know that when I get excited and I like a player's idea, I don't generally say no, I usually say yes, which can lead to some cases of contradictions and all of that. That being said, it is okay to do this, it is okay to make mistakes, and you shouldn't hold yourself to some stupid idea of perfection, because no one's going to achieve that, and if someone tells you that you're imperfect, you should proudly say yes, because you're aware of your own imperfections. A bad GM tries to be perfect, a good GM accepts that they're not. So that meant as a double-sided coin in the main way, you'll make happy accidents. Very true. Sometimes some of the best things have come out of improvisation in a moment of excitement. There's always two ways to look at it. A perfectionist and improvement don't go together. Well, no, not always. Well, I guess it depends on how you define perfectionist, right? Ultimately, the intent behind your practice and creation. Oh, and improv don't go together. I see. Okay, I know that makes more sense, but I still want to talk about this. Your intent behind what you're creating versus your mindset when you don't achieve it. It is good to strive to be better in an attempt to reach perfection, but it is also important to keep in mind that you shouldn't put yourself down for not achieving perfection, because perfection, first and foremost, is not a real thing. It doesn't have a proper definition that can be pointed at and said that is perfect. It is all subjective. So somebody might look at Learn Mortality and say that's perfect. Another person might look at that and say, wow, that sucks ass. And both of those people's opinions are valid, because at the end of the day, it is not a real thing. It is just a perspective. Great! Exactly. I mean, it would hurt my feelings if you said Learn Mortality sucks, but I would never be able to tell you you're wrong, right? I think that's where I'm going with this. So if you're trying to improve, that is good and important. You should never just be, like, happy with stagnation. You should always be aiming for something better, you know? Push yourself out of your comfort zone, do things that feel like you can't do them, and maybe finish something, like for example, whenever I take on a new project, right, usually I try and have a goal that I think is too hard. And then I dial everything back until I can achieve that goal in a almost complete way. For example, in Learn Mortality, I challenged myself to keep it to a small location. I don't think I can actually achieve that, so it ended up expanding to an area outside of Isotiller. But the goal was to keep it to just Isotiller. I had ideas along the way which made me, air quote, stray from perfection. However, I don't think anyone here would say that's a bad thing. It made the campaign better. So, you know, don't let your goals stop you from making something good, I guess. Don't try to be completely original. I actually disagree with this point. I think it's quite important to try and be original. I think if you're going out of your way to make something, you should make something that is your own creation. And how do I put this? There is a statement that actually really pisses me off because I think the people that say it do not understand what they're saying. And that statement is that there's nothing new under the sun. This statement is false. What do I mean by this? Okay, watch this. I'm gonna disprove this statement real quick, right? Alright. Is that a circle? Obviously, yes. Is that the same circle? Technically, yes. But this circle's on the right, therefore it's different from the circle on the left. That is how you should approach writing your stories. You can make something, but just because it's something you yourself made, it is different. Even if it's similar to something else, that does not mean it's fucking, like, not original. It is original. And in fact, let's say the combination, right? Let's say you do this, like you literally copy something directly. You can mask it. Oh my god, Jared, you know what? You knew exactly where I was going. You knew exactly where I was going. Here's a square. Let's say I like this square, right? Oh, I put my square in. Oh, look at that! Now that's something completely different, and you could never say that this is the circle or the square. It's both of them. So, by combining two things that you like, you get something original, and maybe someone else comes to this conclusion, but in that case... Here. You shouldn't worry about copying someone else too, because let's say someone else really likes the square and the circle, but they draw it like this. So those are incredibly similar, but theirs is theirs and yours is yours. Just because they look the same does not mean that they are the same. By being a different person, you yourself are adding something to this. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that you shouldn't try and come up with a four-dimensional shape. Like, Vaughn does have a point when saying you shouldn't try to be wholly original, right? You shouldn't try and be like, actually, that's a quatrain. Thank you very much. You know what I mean? That's just stupid. But also, you shouldn't be like, well, someone else has already made a square, therefore I'm never gonna draw a square. Do you know how much of art boils down to shapes? Look, there's a square. Ooh, more squares. And then I draw, here's my little character, and he's got big, and he's got funny feet, and his feet are like that. If I'm not allowed to draw squares, I can't make Frederick real! God damn it, and I love Frederick! He's perfect! Yeah, this is the big zombie. This is actually a house. So yeah, that's my rant on originality. I think it's actually a lot easier to be original than people think. And I think you should not listen to anyone telling you that you'll never be original, because that person is mathematically, philosophically, and objectively wrong, and I have just proved it in two simple shapes. And if that person argues with you, show them the circle and the square. Tell them how stupid they are. Maybe not specifically that aggressively. They might not like that. Most people don't like being told they're stupid. But I think this is pretty undeniable proof that it is a matter of what you consider different. I'm gonna actually copy the circle thing again, as I think the circle is the most important point here. Did I just come up with this on the spot, and this is like a great I didn't plan this, by the way. This just happened, but I'm really actually proud of this. I think this is ultimately, like, the most important takeaway, right? This is A1, this is A2. They are mathematically the same circle, but A2 has been translated over in that direction. And in mathematics, right? This could be x, and this could be x plus 3. And at the end of the day, let's say you're making a function. Hey, look, I'm gonna do mathematical proof. Watch this. let's say you take 2 circles, that's x squared, and this other one is x plus 3 squared, right? So the complexity is going to compound upon itself until you get something that is completely different. And hey look, just by adding a new thing where I make it a 3D circle and now it's a sphere, wow, those are not the same thing. True, you could even take this into the definition of time. At this point, I'm just kind of rambling for the sake of fun, but I think this proves how, you know, your point has gotten me to do math. I love math, dude. Risk of Rain 1 is not the same as Risk of Rain 2. True, there is a 2 in the name. Is this ultimately semantics? Yes. But I think you can see how you can apply this to a situation where you have hundreds of thousands of circles. At that point, it's very easy to make it your own, just by adding 1 square in there. Or a few more circles. And the fact that it's you yourself making it already makes it unique, you know? Because you're never going to make the same thing as someone else. Even if you traced it, you'd still make slight changes, you know what I mean? Like, I could try and replicate this Millie over here perfectly. It would end up being a new Millie, and I would discover things along the way that make it easy for me to make a new Millie. And I have gone completely off topic, but this was fun. Let's go back to making a world, yeah? Yeah. I'm gonna actually snip this real quick. Millie, hold this. That'll do. Cool. Sorry, I'm being picky. Now it looks like Millie is just legs holding up a box, but you know what? Whatever, it works. Bear Island? Holy shit. Okay. So this is the part that I'm only mildly anxious about, because we're actually going to try and make this next part good. We're actually try and put some effort into it. Mettaton Millie. I love it. Temptation to draw Milliton is very high. Yo, what up? It's Duncan. Duncan, we're into the map making section. You want to help throw some stupid ideas out here? Orc City? Yeah, dude. Orc City. Alright. So, actually, I'm gonna... what color do I want? Yeah. You? Maybe you. Sure. That'll do. So, I would like to sketch the world map real quick, based on what you guys have determined. And I'm gonna try and block it out in a similar way to how I would block out a map if I was making a game. So I'm gonna use red to kind of define the sketch, right? So on the side here, we know that the setting is in Japan. We know that we have a city, and we want to have 3 areas of interest: a forest, a rural area, and an underground area. So it might actually be helpful to, after we make this top map, to duplicate it and have an overlay that shows the subway system. Yes, the flesh wall. I won't forget the flesh wall. But we're starting with basics, because that's important to not get overwhelmed and try and do everything at once. So let's go with the forest. And instead of doing anything complicated, I'm just going to say, this section of the map is forest. This section of the map is forest. And go something like that. And let's make a small forest. Oops, not you. Small forest here. Okay, there's our forest areas, right? Ultimately speaking, we're going to want to break these into smaller chunks to actually figure out what we need to do here. But let's name these areas. We've got a north forest, we've got a south forest, and we've got a little park. You guys want to name any of these things? Is it easier to run a game if the starting point is in the center or if the starting point is deeper on a specific end of it? I think it doesn't matter, personally. I think if you put the point in the center, it means to the players they can go anywhere. If you put the point on a side, it gives them a direction. It makes them realize, progress is that way. So in this case, I think we're going to actually start them, well, actually, no. I'm gonna ask you guys. Orc Park? Okay, fine. It's Orc Park. Fucking... goddamn it. Are you happy? No. What the hell did I just do? Ah. And it decided a font for this game, too. What's a fun font? Broadway? Oh. CC Wild Words. Yeah, that fits. There we go. Looks like Comic Sans. That's fitting for a zombie thing. Get Orc of my way. Starting them in Orc Park would be fun. Gives them visibility, but isn't at the true center. I like that. In my mind, I was imagining an opening scene where they're looking over a vista with like the mountains in the background and they're seeing the city. So what if Orc Park is on like the south side of the city? So let's do city in yellow. Breath of the Wild moment, shut up. So let's say this is the city, right? And this way they've got city limits that they can explore, or they can leave out into this area over here. What is over here? Well, we have yet to determine that, but that is an option. Imagine being trapped in a roller coaster. I was thinking a public park, like trees and shit. Are we putting a roller coaster here, guys? Is this a theme park? Have I been vetoed? Alright, we're gonna put a Ferris wheel here. That's gonna give a a goal, as stupid as it is. Sure. It is different. Yeah, the park is gonna be the park, but there's a Ferris wheel here. Regular park. Alright, so let's take the park and let's say give a real quick sketch of what the terrain is gonna look like, right? There's a little fountain there, and there's some benches. And wow, and then we take a little black dot and we say the players are hiding inside of this bush. They have set up under the bush in the park. They start there. Yeah. Where else are we gonna fight the Bowser mech? Mama Peach! Oh, true. Actually, that's a really fun idea. You took one of the carts from the Ferris wheel, and you're using it as a makeshift hiding spot. So you've got like kind of a broken, defunct Ferris wheel as the back setting. Okay, that makes me not actually fucking hate this idea. Congratulations, you saved the Ferris wheel. Mama Peach. Thank you, Duncan. Okay, cool. So that's Orc Park. We know our starting location. Awesome. Let's figure out what the city looks like. The ticket security stuff would be a good place to camp out in Apocalypse. Yeah, maybe, or maybe there's some food over here. I think also, since we're determining stuff about this city, I'm gonna put some lore over on the side because I think this is important to guide us. So, city. Name the city. Chat, name the city. Don't make me regret this. Smoothie? That sounds like a reality TV show star. That or an STD. Phoenix City. Toys. Toy Smoothie. Schmoys. Schmeenix. What he just said. You guys really giving me great options here. Town, Jared. Smory Tory. Pepsi Land, Right City. Okay, here, how about I help you guys out? This is going to be a name that comes up a lot in our campaign. Not only should it be good, it should relate to the central theme of survival, of giant zombie, of maybe some medical stuff, so the name should sound like it fits this setting. So maybe penicillin, if I'm going off your second Pepsi Land idea. Penicil. A suggestion, Uptown. Uptown sounds more like a district, but that could work. Not. I'm just gonna put it down as penicillin for now. That's the only thing I like. Sorry, chat. If you guys come up with anything good, actually message it. Alright. But, that's fine. That's the city. Within the city, let's determine a few things. First and foremost, what year is it? Are we going to be in the modern era, or are we going to be Reventropolis? That's not a bad name. Reventro on its own is actually... That's a unique name. I like that. What do you guys think? Early 2000s? So this lore is going to be pretty important because this determines what type of vehicles are there. Agorotopia. That's funny. I like the suggestion of early 2000s. So let's put it at a simple round number. It's the year 2000. What time of year are we in? And is the season going to matter? Definitely summertime. Any particular reason why you would want it to be summer? If the city is tropical, it might not even have a snowy winter season. Very true. Makes the vibe for hot days and cool nights. Alright, I think that's a good enough reason. It gives us variety. Alright. Next, I think we should determine where in the world it is. So let's just say geography. This will determine what type of people live here. It'll determine maybe some local, like, attractions that are more common or less common. My idea of near the mountains. Okay, there's a lot of options for that. Maybe we're in Austria? Austrian zombies, that could explain why it's a little bit more difficult to get out of the city. A dormant volcano. We could do Yellowstone. Yellowstone National Park zombies. We could do, we could do Bogota zombies. Make it more jungly. we could do Pacific Island zombies, which would isolate us not in terms of being able to, you know, run away from the city, but you literally wouldn't be able to swim off the island. Pacific Island would be cool, yeah. I think that's something that's not as common, so maybe that's more interesting to pursue. Could be a mountain and a volcano? True, okay. Sure. Why was that so big? The hell? Okay, Pacific Islands subtext volcano. Okay. We can figure out what specific Pacific Island later, but this gives enough of an idea to go off of, I think. You know? Obviously, it's going to be very different based on what island? But this is a fantasy location, we can just make one up. It doesn't have to be a real-world location. I don't know why the font is doing this. It's being a little bitch. Okay. We're in era of tech, but not era of cell phones. We have a variety of temperatures. Ground zero, okay. So, yeah, that could work, that could work. Zombie, virus, ground zero. So rather than doing an apocalypse, the rest of the world is actually fine. I think that adds a really interesting conflict, because what this would do is, if the players do get a ship to get off of the island, for example, then they have the added question of, do we leave or do we try and solve the mystery? Maybe there are some characters here that wouldn't be able to get out with them, and their attachment to those NPCs makes them want to stay behind. Either way, this could be a alternate win con of just leaving the island. I would assume the main win con would be to cure yourself. Cure party. Okay. So that gives us two major goals to build the map around. So I was pretty sure this was going to happen anyway, it was just why I drew the map like this, but this confirms it. So we're going to want to consider like the edges of the map a lot. We need to make sure that this box is semi-permeable. So there's going to be like a police barricade, there's the wall of flesh, right? All of those are, while not hard barricades, they are still barricades that would discourage them from leaving. And would also give ways for them to try and figure this out. Maybe they cure themselves, but they still have to escape. There's another way. Should be a secret lab location to do the science curate. Maybe. Maybe. I feel like you're approaching cliche a little bit too much there, so I'm not sure on that one. Well, let's set up what we do now. How about that? Now that I've got the map laid out, and again, I'm just gonna block this out as different locations. We'll worry about like figuring out the explicit stuff later. So I'm gonna use white to designate things that are kind of barriers. So let's say, I'm assuming we're gonna want a barrier here, right? Do you guys want this to be the police barricade on the left, or do you guys want this to be the wall of flesh? Those are the two barricades we know we want to have. A repair/supply hospital lab? Kind of combining into like a resource? Possibly. That could work. And I'm gonna put the other obstacle here. And then maybe let's put another one here. We don't know what this is yet, but we can define something for this. This barricade should be further away so it isn't immediately obvious that the police are trapping people. I agree with that. So maybe we go over here, And we're gonna use this as like a line of sight blocker, right? So they can't see past here, and then there is maybe a bridge here, right? And that's where we get our police barricade. That means it's like really out of the way. I don't know how to draw a police barricade, so I'm just gonna draw some circles and we're gonna call them cop cars, okay? Okay. Yeah. That way, it's like they're staying far enough away from the city to not be seen, but if you do try and leave, you'll run into them. I think also this brings up something important we should talk about, which is landmarks and sightlines. So we start in the Orc Park, but how are they supposed to figure out where to go from here? What do they see from their location? I would like to think that the city is in a divot, because we're in a volcano, right? So it's a little lower to the ground, and the mountains and the forests are up higher. Fires, huh? Ooh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Fires. Like a section of the forest is on fire? That's very interesting. That might almost be too interesting, if you know what I mean. That might be like, they'll want to go there, you know? But maybe not. Maybe we can make it more reasonable. I like the idea a lot because it's not what I expected, so sure. Let's put a fire over here. And we'll refine that later, we just know we want a fire. Cool. And let's name this forest while I'm here. What do you guys want to call the fire forest? The Flame of Hope. Oh, I see, I see. Red Pine Woods? Yeah. Sure. And up to the north, we have another forest. North Forest could be cold-based. Very true. We could go, like, maybe blue spruce. That's a traditionally cold, so we could have... no, not trail. What would be a good word for this? Reserve? Yeah. So this is a national park, which that means two things. One, it explains the connection here between the government and the national park. So maybe their base of operations is literally right here. We could do that. It's an idea. We don't know why there's a forest fire, but that's definitely something they can consider. And I'm gonna go ahead and... I don't know what color to use for this, but... definitely not that color. That looks good. Okay, so there is one obvious path, and we want this to be open world enough. However, if the forest is on fire, I think that necessitates a timer. And that's also kind of really nice, because that packs up everything we talked about earlier. They know it's there. You don't have to tell them it's a timer, it's a fire. They know the fire is going to do fire things. The only thing this does is it makes it harder for you, because you have to determine what if they do it first, they do it second, they do it third, And then what if they just fail, you know? They don't go there and the fire's taken out. Maybe it's a zombie fort? I love that. So this is like a controlled burning? I do like that. That is quite interesting. Okay, and that would... Okay. So the issue that we would have there is that despite not... Where did my character go? What the fuck? Why do I keep killing her? Yeah, so... This is interesting, right? But unfortunately with this, they're still going to assume that it has a timer. So there is going to be that instinctual feeling of, we should go there, because it looks important. So let's put some other monuments and landmarks that might also catch their attention in the city. What other things do you think they would see? I heard mention of a hospital earlier, which could be on the opposite side, closer to the cold, and could also potentially lead them to seeing the wall of flesh, which maybe we could make it a sort of an experiment of some sort, you know? So I'm gonna do that, because that sounds fun. Smokestack of another survivor group. Yeah, that sounds like a good minor, like, side goal, like something they could notice, you know? Optional. But definitely like that idea. They're definitely going to want to meet some NPCs and characters. Another thing that you might want to actually consider while working on this is characters. I didn't really talk about NPCs very much, but where they are and where they go on the map is also pretty important, especially if you want to introduce a character early. You're going to want to have them, you know, closer. So let's just assume that there is an important character in the survivor group. So let's put the survivor group right there. A successful roll would let them see this, and they could go and meet someone. They're probably going to want to do this quite quickly, so you should probably make it quite easy for them to see this. So that makes another option at the start. Look at that, we got two. And I think we're gonna go with a third being... Oops. I think the third is I can't draw. I think going to the hospital is also going to be an immediate thing, because they're going to know, like, I'm assuming this just happened, right? This whole infection is new. So they'll probably be like, well, we should go to the hospital, maybe there are doctors still there. So this might be one that you just give them immediately, and maybe the hospital has a really cool silhouette, and they can see it above, like, all the other buildings, right? And this could be a dungeon, right? This could be effectively an area that we really, really work on, right? And rather than wasting time on the journey here, we just skip this entire part, and then we only build the hospital. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's like, while generic, it gets the idea across. Why did I put an S here? It's one hospital. Okay, those are pretty cool. We also know that we want to have a looming threat. We want to have the jumbo zombie being a recurring antagonist. Should there be maybe a super dangerous area in the center that is guarded more by the jumbo zombie? Maybe there is a Eiffel Tower adjacent monument, like a radio tower. Maybe you can see the city's communication center, and you know that if you get the message out to the rest of the world, maybe they can save you. That makes it a very nice, like, early level challenge, right? Because you could keep the amount of zombies there low and have it where after they spend enough time there, the big chaser zombie comes in and fucks shit up and they leave, you know? So I think it's important to have, like, especially when you know where they're starting, tutorial areas and or examples of the game's mechanics are really crucial, right? Despite them being able to go up to this forest fire, this is like... I know I talked about this earlier, but this is like... You do this if you don't mind potentially dying. Like, this is fucking scary. And I think the party will know that this is, like, maybe not a good idea to go here immediately. Hospital less so you should probably make the hospital a little more accommodating. So let's just say this is like A1, and let's say A2. The most likely places for them to go at the start are gonna be the hospital or this radio tower in the center. Right? As you can see, this is already getting pretty complicated and we've barely set anything up. So limiting our world, like, I might end up deleting the radio tower later if we come up with something better, you know? But for now, we can put it down. I think having a, you know, a bunch of, like, obvious options is good. So they could just grab that color and just say they can go here, 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 and here. So this is like optimal, right? This is where you encourage them to go. Maybe. Or maybe the hospital's optimal because you really want them to have the survivors. In fact, actually, now I think the radio tower is optimal, right? That's where they'd most likely want to go. So let's grab the survivors. Let's move them over here. That way you can grab them on the way. And also this way we can focus on a very simple thing. So along the way on the tutorial you have, this is a zombie fight, right? This just introduces them to the mechanics. Maybe here we find an important NPC or scene. And then finally, the big radio tower encounter and potential fight with Mr. Big Zombie. You know, that's like a nice flow to things. And maybe, again, the players could be like, actually, we're gonna skip that. Or they could go like, maybe like this is another direction we support, right? And then if they go that direction, they get something else here. And theoretically, right, of course, once they get this, they could go there, they could go there, there's millions of options, right? And then, now that we have this, right, we're gonna want to put in that last element that we were talking about of the underground. So maybe the way they escape the chaser monster is through the underground. And this is their first entrance into the underground, right? And they're like, oh god, the world is huge. And this just like overwhelms them with choice, right? And because we're underground, we can't make any landmarks. So how do they know where to go? Well, they eventually find their way back here, and this is locked, right? Because there is a collapse, but they can make it fast travel. Now they can go back to the start and choose if they want to go this way or that way. You have fast travel open. However, this is a hub of fast travel, so maybe it also lets them go up to the Blue Spruce Reserve. Or there's a way all the way over here that some people have like made a path up into the mountains, and this path eventually leads them to be able to see this way, right? You can see the cop barricade, so that's another way that they could potentially gain this information, is they follow the underground track this way. And at this point, you're pretty much just making a maze for your players. You don't have to be this explicit also. You could just not plan out these paths and just let the players find them themselves. But I think for the sake of the explanation, I'm going to be explicit here just so that we have more to talk about. And yeah, we have an awesome starting point, I think. We have where the survivors are. We know our important NPCs. Here, let me also mark down Big Zombie. Let's say Big Zombie is right there. He's drawn in by the radio tower when you go there. Because we want a tutorial on fighting the Big Zombie. We want to introduce him as a threat, but we don't want them to potentially encounter him in a situation where it feels unfair. So we put him over here. Look at that. Maybe we can find random food, an isolated NPC. Yeah, these are all great ideas, and I think I'm going to stop overcomplicating it at this point, because these are choices that we can make in these individual maps rather than on the big map. Right now, we're just kind of determining flow, so let's put down... I'm gonna just mark this as B1, B2, B3. So ultimately speaking, we can go over here and we can be like, all right, what have we got? We got Orc Park. We want an Orc Park map. We want to make the Survivor map. We're gonna want to make B1, which is the inner city streets. So we might go B1, B2, B3, and then we're gonna want the hospital map, which is a dungeon. So all the maps inside, information we find there. We want the Red Pine Woods. We need two things. We need the path out, and we need the regenerating fire forest. And then we have the Blue Spruce Reserve, which we have not figured out what we're doing with yet, but we know we're going to want to prep that area. On top of this, we're also going to say we want Flesh Wall and Cop Barricade. And that gives a what they would call a minimum viable product, or MVP. Essentially, if you're able to get all of these things done, even though it's not super interesting, the game will function. It is playable. It may not be amazing, but just by getting this, like, I didn't even have to suggest it, but you guys were coming up with some really cool ideas. Like we've got, oh, what if there's 2 infections? What if there's graffiti? Local TV station, right? Like, all of those ideas are going to naturally come to you now that you have a framework to work off of. So rather than planning those out before we put them down, it's often important to just put down like a sketch. Kind of like, imagine you're working on an artwork. You don't want to just immediately jump into drawing the final render. You want to figure out the pose first. So if you jump into the final render without figuring out the pose is going to end up looking awkward. Same thing with tabletops. If you jump into the story without figuring out the world, your story's going to end up kind of awkward. So, this is pretty cool. We've got the world of Reventro. And are you ready for the last thing? We actually already finished part of it. That's right. Already got B2 done, look at that. And that also informs another part of this, which is, there's a river. Look at that. And then that just fits in. Teacher's pet. What is your homework assignment? Your homework assignment is to simplify whatever you're working on. Figure out the core concepts of your campaign, and make sure that those are what you do first. If you wanted some like actual stream relevant homework, you can try and like figure out a fun little unique area for like maybe B1 or B3. And maybe whenever we talk about individual battle maps, which is what I plan on doing for those, is we're going to talk about, like, we're going to use the zombie forces as an example for how to handle a dynamic battle map and how to handle a simple battle map. Because there are ways to build your battle maps in such a way that the players have an advantage or the antagonists have an advantage, and a lot of thought goes into the actual layout. So, I'm not gonna get ahead of myself. I'm really trying... I am trying to keep this simple, but it is a very complicated topic, so I apologize if anything in this stream was a little rambly or distracted. That's just kind of part of the creative process, though. So I hope you got some takeaways from this. I think that whatever you're doing, this is a very manageable way to start. I'm pretty much at the end of what I wanted to talk about. I'm definitely going to do some more streams on this topic. In fact, I might pretty up this map and come back to you guys with a more detailed version of this map that I spent some time on off stream. And we can use what we came up with here as a baseline to jump off of for some other stuff.
Great!
Great! And as far as topics I want to cover in the future, I think next time will either be baseline mechanics that build up the world. So we'll probably look at creating a custom antagonist. We might focus on a main antagonist, so we might go into this big zombie. Or we could go into some simpler, more like supportive world mechanics, such as developing the pathogen 10-point scale, which I think is also an excellent topic for discussion, because at that point it's a matter of just like balancing your mechanic and how like fair you want it to be, basically. How prevalent of a force in the campaign you want it to be. I feel like a lot of my tips boil down to just kind of do it how you want to, but unfortunately that's kind of how I do it, because I don't know, I trust my own process. It's why I want to ask again if there are any questions, because I know from an outsider's perspective it's possible that maybe there's still some of this where you're like, how did you do that? I don't understand. So, is there anything you guys want clarification on before I wrap this up? I'm putting you on spot, chat. Putting you on spot. Professor Tally's asking questions. What's the square root of Blue Spruce Reserve? Alright, cool. I'm glad that everything's understandable. And looking at this map again, this... how do I put this? This is mainly for the sake of example and teaching. I don't really like this map too much, but I also don't hate it, and I think if we continue along with it, we can develop it and change it around. There is the potential to have moving forces on this map, and it is ultimately very streamlined, so I think it solves all of the goals we had for this campaign. I don't see any that I missed. And I think you can think about going into this campaign as like if you were the one making this, for example, right? Maybe you care a lot more about the individual locations, like the hospital and the radio tower, and you don't really care about the interim, like where the zombies are fought. In that case, maybe you zoom in on one of those locations and, you know, make a very detailed layout, place little bits of lore in there, all of that stuff. It's ultimately based on what you care about, and I think it's important that when you're building a campaign, you don't spend too much time making an area you don't like, because ultimately speaking, that's just a waste of everyone's time. So if for some reason you don't like something, it's okay to just skip over it. And there are millions of ways to write it in a fluid and functional way. You just gotta try things out. No idea is unworkable, just underdeveloped. And with that, I think we're gonna wrap things up here. Thanks for popping out and asking questions, guys. This was really fun. I'm excited to see what we do with the world of Reventro. I don't know if I'm gonna stick to the one world. We might branch out a little bit. Who knows? I'm just kind of trying things. This is like school but fun? Dude, learning rocks! That's why I always am like, college is garbage. You have to pay a bunch of money for people who don't want to be there teaching you. Just watch YouTube videos, man. It's how I learned everything. It's how I learned how to code. It's how I learned how to draw. It's how I learned how to write. All from just watching and consuming, you know? I take in the things I like, and it is now my art style. Not when you're forced to learn. Hey, don't tell anyone I said this. You can skip school and work on what's actually important. You can do it. But you didn't hear it from me. I would never do that. I never skipped school to go work on Terranopolis or Kozioku Tabletop. That never happened. I definitely didn't pretend to be sick for 3 months on end so I could make Bridge. That never happened. This actually is like, if there's any advice I can give you guys on life, I don't know how much you give a shit about me. I'm just some random gal on the internet making stuff, but like, you're here, so whatever, I might as well say it. What other people value that is important does not matter. It's only what you think's important. And I use college as an example for that. The world says that that is the way you get smart. I counter that with, I think there are better ways for me to get smart. I'm saying this like a fucking preschooler. Do thing, get smart, do other thing, get smart. But honestly, that's how it works. So if you yourself feel like school is awful, then get out of there. Do what you actually want. There's nothing wrong with pursuing your dreams in abstract and weird ways. And a lot of people like me do it, so find someone who can support you all the way through, you know? Someone who will be like, hey, it's okay. Obviously, I'm not saying throw everything away that you're doing, but like, I took a calculated risk in leaving college and all of that. And from my perspective, it was stay in college and slowly bleed out and then go into the games industry, or go pursue everything I ever wanted to do without having to talk to the corpos. I think it's easy to tell why I made this choice, is I hate working for people, plain and simple. I'm far too much of a opinionated person to listen to what other people tell me, you know? If you judge a fish on how it climbs a tree, it will always be a failure. That's a wonderful way to put it. So yeah, are there some concessions that you have to make with the world? Is it set up in such a way that you are encouraged to go get a career and follow a career path? Unfortunately, yes. But if you have the ways to get around that and you have a support system, you can probably find a way around it. I don't know. I might just be talking bullshit, but if I was able to make it work, you can make it work. making the dream work, yeah. I think the world's full of too many people telling you not to follow your dreams these days. I say fuck them. Follow your dreams. Bite into your dream with the aggression of a dog doing a tug-of-war. And don't let go till you get that goddamn milk bone, you got it? Is this metaphor good? Is anybody following this? Is anybody still here? Alright, hey, thanks for watching, everyone.